This is a production of Cornell University.
Yeah, let's get this ball rolling. Thanks everyone for tuning in, listening, viewing, live audience. 8th episode this year, the Cornell Turf Show. Excited to have our friend Dan Schied, the director of grounds here at Cornell University, our Big Red grounds director. So Dan, we're going to talk to him today about some kind of unique things he's doing around campus, things that we'd like to share with everybody. But as always, we'll start with a little kind of weekly recap from Frank, as always this morning.
Carl, can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, there we go. Well, this is becoming a popular pastime these days. People bringing flocks of flamingos. I think people describe it as being flocked when people come and do this to your lawn. So Dan, we got to give the students the idea to do this around campus. In the meantime, let me highlight Rodney, who's still working on this. Our guy mowing lawns, raising men, working now to create a more positive image between the community and law enforcement. And of course, this is a volatile and complex issue, and you got to love this guy running across the country, creating dialogue, getting people to work and talk together. And it's a place where lawns, which usually are divisive, can be a place where we all come together. And I'm always pleased to start at any time highlighting that. But not if you're a mole. I know I have a close friend that many people know, Dave Chinnery, one of our extension faculty in the Capital District, has been on a personal mission to eradicate moles from his lawn and landscape. This is not reared its head as much as voles. I do hear people talking about it, but this is what it's like when you harpoon or you snap trap a mole. It's not a pleasant situation. This was a golf course superintendent in the Midwest. So just in case you think you're having a bad day. Another shout out here, Carl, to the National Lawn Care folks. This April is Lawn Care Month. And I think one of the things we are trying to do here at Cornell in our extension program, and certainly with our county-based faculty in extension world, extension agents like Dave and Jennifer, Hillary, Marie, Victoria in Connecticut, Joelle, and everybody who works out in the field. You know, we're trying to make what does grass do for us? What role does this plant system play in society, if you want to be climate smart, if you want to be water quality conscious, if you live around a lake. So, I think there's ways of highlighting these things, and national associations are jumping on that. All right, let's get in the weeds, so to speak. Just to remind everybody, while I look out at 30 degrees and snow here in upstate New York, I'm sure Dan had to get out of the truck and looking at salting and I don't think plowing, but certainly salting operations around campus today. That can be a topic of conversation, but it's important to know that we're much well ahead of normal. You look out in Buffalo and the East End of Long Island, throughout the region, you see that in general, the growing season is a week or two ahead of normal, just, counting it up over the last several weeks. You can go back further and it's likely even further ahead of normal. Now, where it's white, it means that they really haven't accumulated any base 50 growing degree days, right? These base 50 growing degree days are the degree days where we think biological activity gets going. It's where we measure the way the growing season gets going, much like we measure growing seasons for vegetables, like between frost-free dates. Well, it's also important to know that the real story getting out of the gate is not that it's been warm, right? And we've been talking about that forever with the way the climate's been changing. But where are we relative to moisture? Now, if you look over the last month, you can see that throughout much of the Northeast, once you get north of the Pennsylvania border, it's 25 to 75% of normal precipitation. It's a bit on the dry side. Now, as we say every week, wherever, if it's a Thursday or Friday, and wherever Rich Buckley is, it's likely raining. And no surprise, much of New Jersey, Long Island, the metropolitan New York area, southeastern Connecticut, Orange County, had a lot of rainfall, excessive rainfall, 1-2 inches or more in the past week. But in general, a lot of the region has persistently been dry. And so you look at the drought map that came out on Thursday, and you can see already these things that are more longer term, as I've learned from my colleague Arti Gaetano, longer term measures of precipitation. We start to see that again, Western New York, Western Pennsylvania, the Adirondacks, Northern New England, and as usual, Southeastern New England, along Connecticut, Rhode Island, you're getting and still have drought conditions. It's been abnormally dry. Now, lest you think we have real dry weather, I ask you to just put it in perspective with what our colleagues and fellow citizens out west are experiencing in places like Nevada, Colorado, Utah. The governor has already started to discuss restrictions, planning for restrictions in the state of Utah, and relative to lawns. And we can get Paige Boyle on later in the turf show as the weeks go on, to talk about the way they have to water out there to provide that turf. Because should we get into a dry condition, we're going to want to understand that a little bit better, and where better to do it than out west. Now, as we move into sort of where we are in the season, I think the thing that gets everybody's attention early on is generally how quick is the grass greening up? Do I have to mow it yet? And what weeds are growing? Well, if you're looking at weeds now that are really actively growing, things like annual bluegrass, henbit. In this case, this is a picture of purple dead nettle, right? Henbit that is starting to grow. Probably you'll see seedlings of some perennials now. If you're going to do some broadleaf, post-emergent broadleaf weed control to these populations of plants, you want to get them pretty quickly now. I would recommend spot treating them in places if you felt like you had to do it, if they were really disrupting the quality of the site. But once they get into warm weather and flowering, they're going to die, right? They're going to die. So if these are objectionable now, you might want to do some spot treating and then get some seed in the ground, right? Get some grass growing, and maybe even a fertilizer shot, but we'll talk about that. All right, here's the progression of soil temperatures, and you can see not very much. It's a little bit warmer. You're starting to see a little bit more into the 50s now, but most into the high 40s. And you got to get down to South Jersey into the Delmarva till you get into the 50s on a regular basis. And yesterday in the podcast, in the show with John Inguigiato at Connecticut, we talked about, it's not just a blip. It's like how soil is something that warms over time, or, getting warm and staying warm is how biological organisms evolve and persist through the year. So just temperature fluctuations here or there. The story here is, it's barely getting into the 50s in most places. Now, usually what happens, again, what we think about is I got to get my weed and feed out. I got to get my weed and feed that has pre-emergent crabgrass control in it. And so when you have that mindset to get your pre's down, you can see that the green is the ideal time for pre-emergent applications. And we are really in that ideal time throughout much of the Northeast, with just a little bit on the early side and again, on the later side, but still okay, down into Delmarva. So you certainly have a couple of weeks yet. Now, what does this relate to? Well, obviously, if you're looking at pre-emergent crabgrass control in a lawn care setting, you're trying to tie it into when the crabgrass germinates and get that barrier down and active before it germinates. Now, if you're a lawn care operator that's trying to spray 3,000 lawns, as we talk about oftentimes, it's going to take you a while to get that done. And so consequently, you try to get it down early. Now, one of the things you have to understand is if the germination is not going to happen for a few weeks, which I think we can say with some confidence it's not going to happen for a few weeks, you get that pre-emergent down and then it's going to wear out while seedlings are still emerging later in the season or break down more rapidly. Now, this is going to be slowed and changed based on soil conditions. If it's really dry, it's probably not going to break down very much. And also, if it's really dry, not a lot of weeds are going to be germinating. So, you want to keep these things in mind as you think about timing and persistence of these herbicide applications that you make. So we use the old fashioned phenological indicators, generally around forsythia bloom, full bloom is where you start to see some early germinates in open areas of crabgrass, but we're still a little ways from that. And it's important to understand when you look at how crabgrass emerges, that it emerges slowly over a long period of time. It's not necessarily something that happens all at once. And so having that barrier coinciding with the germination in where crabgrass is a big problem for you is important to use that chemical as wisely as possible. Now, the other thing, of course, we're thinking about in the springtime is fertilization. And I'll just draw your attention again as we start to think about these things, particularly when they have water quality concerns. And more people are going to be concerned about that, as they should be. And especially in the lawn and grounds area where you got a lot of grass abutting or right next to pavement. You want to be really mindful when you put something down. If it spills there, you got to clean it up. You don't want to get it into the drain. You want to make sure it gets into the canopy so it can't run off with a heavy rainfall right into a sewer. So that, these areas are very high risk when we don't actually think about it much like that. And so in this publication, I'll draw your attention to how they recommend fertilizing. Now, for example, if you go in and you fertilize just once a year, right? One of the things that's really important is you just don't see a lot of people recommending early spring fertilizer. Maybe you fertilize twice a year. They want you to get it on a little bit early, greater than 50% at slow release, and less than 9/10 of a pound of total nitrogen. So again, in non-sensitive areas, right? Areas where there maybe isn't surface water, maybe where you don't have to worry about spilling it on the pavement if you're making 2 applications. Obviously, when you get to 3 and 4 applications, you can see that the nitrogen gets spread out over the course of the year. So if you're putting it down 4 times, this is saying you're putting on about 3¼ pounds, 4 times, 3¼ pounds of nitrogen, at least half of it as slow release. Right, you get to 2 applications a year, you're at about 1.8, right? If you're making 2 fertilizer applications a year. Now, there's a totally different mindset if you're thinking about environmentally sensitive areas, right? If you're thinking about near where you have water quality issues, where you have lakes, where you have pavement, where their risk gets a little bit higher right next to the pavement, right next to the lake, right? No surprise here. So you notice, again, not much fertilizer recommended in the early part of the year, and certainly no fertilizer ever recommended during summer months, right? When nitrogen is probably coming free from the soil anyway. So really important to remind yourself that's a very easy publication to get your hands on. It's available online. I think we connect to it on our website. If we don't, Carl, we'll be sure to put that link up. Now, as I welcome my pal here, let me introduce him a little bit. I got a couple of things to set him up for our discussion today. And first is, of course, I'm going to embarrass him. I told him I was going to do it when we were finishing our beverages on Wednesday evening. Professional grounds management, professional lawn care, right? Professional golf course superintendents, professional sports turf managers. When you get paid to do this at the highest level, there's an expectation that not only are the technical stuff, and there's an assumption that you can navigate your way through that, but that you can lead. And that you can, have a plan for what you're going to do. And you have an operation that has processes and maybe even standards if you're lucky. Right. And so Dan, of course, has this great website he maintains here. And in that website, it articulates a little bit about core level surfaces, fee-based surfaces, services that he offers. Quite a bit, obviously Dan's talking about how much lawn he's maintaining. There's obviously a complex landscape of trees and shrubs, 40 miles of storm and sanitary sewers, lawn areas that are damaged by construction. All this stuff costs a little bit more to maintain. But again, the key here I'm trying to highlight is you look at lawns and you look at it in the grounds operation and operationally. When you're a professional, it's important to have that broad view. Now, of course, Dan's big initiative that he had at the University of Rochester and obviously brought here with us over the years has been this tall grass, less gas initiative where we had started to do some of this around campus prior to his arrival. But obviously, when he came here, he really embraced it and has promoted these areas. And I can tell you, there simply isn't a higher profile area on the Cornell campus than here on Live Slope. And of course, as you look across some of these natural areas right on Live Slope, in and amongst the oaks on Live Slope, you see these wonderful vistas that people take pictures of, post, win us awards. But he's also done this in other areas on campus. So as we translate this, into a lawn landscape, right? How is this going to look in a lawn? Is anybody actually going to like this if we put this into a lawn landscape? Is there a value to this in the lawn landscape? And so I'll draw your attention to some thinking that's going on at the University of Minnesota that we've certainly highlighted in the past. And I know Dan gets involved in here, is imagining lawns as having different management levels. None of these systems are no management, right? Even rain gardens, none of these systems are no management. There's some level of management, but as a turf grass manager, sometimes we never really think much beyond just the traditional turf. And I think we're seeing, particularly in, progressive environments like a place like Cornell, interesting in expanding our understanding of to address the spectrum of ways you can use these vegetated surfaces in the landscape. And of course, communicating that. Dan's got the signs, and you wouldn't believe, I'm on this campus every day, Dan, and I actually don't have a picture of these signs that you use on campus. But I know my colleague our colleague Jennifer Lerner down in Putnam County has done a lot with developing these pollinator gardens and creating a pollinator pathway system. And I believe the Cornell campus is becoming part of this pollinator pathway. And it's really just a way of imagining managing the lawn and the landscape in a way that has services. So Dan, I'm going to welcome you to the show. Thanks for being patient while I ranted for the past 15 minutes. And I have a couple of questions up here that I'll leave up there for now. I want to look at you on the side so you can see them there. And so this is what I wanted to chat with you about today. Again, not just the technical stuff like I introduced earlier, but also the mindset that you approach the management of the lawns on this Cornell campus. What's evolved, right? I hate to break it to you. You did retire from one place and now you're at this place. I wonder how you've seen this evolve at two institutions, how lawn is viewed by your customers and how it's maintained by you and the adaptations you might have made over the years. So welcome to the show, Dan. Good to see you. How do you want to approach this really big question?
Well, it's interesting, Frank. So I came to Cornell and of course you're here. And so there's a lot of practices, the campus being this living laboratory. There's stuff that happens here sooner than maybe many other places. So I came from a campus at University of Rochester where, we mowed it 2.5 inches. We ran the weed eater along the edges of the sidewalks, and we keep this nice, more manicured look to the campus. And came here, and at your guidance over the years and the acceptance and the professionalism of the staff here, they picked up and started mowing the lawns at 3.5 inches. Which, as you can imagine, has all the benefits that we talk about, right? Deeper root system, less weed invasion. I mean, all the things that you promote were already in place when I came here. And I have to tell you, my first look at the campus was, oh, that looks different. And now it only took me a couple of weeks, and I love it because you can tell the difference between a 2.5-inch lawn and 3.5-inch lawn. And now I can't even tell the difference anymore. And a lot of the lawns here on campus have been overseeded or sodded with tall fescue, turf type tall fescues, again, at your recommendation for all the reasons that you recommend us, drought tolerance and wearability and all the various things. So a lot of things were in place. And so the difference is I came from a campus that was, more maintained on a more, on a schedule of, weed control and all that. to a campus that says, hey, we're a sustainable campus, right? We're not going to just, we're going to try to manage things as best we can with fewer inputs. And one of probably the easiest thing you can do is raise your mower height right off the bat. And so that was already in place. And I think a lot of those things work for us.
And so in addition to raising the mowing height, we completely eliminated or reduced mowing in a number of areas that you've really moved to. And that also has its sort of, ooh, that looks different. That has its own sort of, ooh, that looks different. There you go. Thanks for doing that, Dan. Really appreciate that. So people say, ooh, that looks different. And talk a little bit about how this started and has evolved.
Well, I think if you're going to do something different, Frank, right, you have to tell people what you're doing. Because if you drove by this is at the main intersection on campus.
Yeah.
It's a slope that was a little hazardous to mow. It was probably just a little over the degrees that you would want to mow. If we just didn't mow it, it'd look like our lawnmower broke down or we were lazy or we didn't know what we're doing. So I think it's important, like you have with that pollinator garden, you know, to some people it might look, well, how come they're not doing anything here? There's all these wildflowers, why do they have goldenrod here and all this kind of stuff. So you educate folks, and we're an educational institution. So in conjunction with our sustainability division that says, you know, Cornell's going to be carbon neutral by 2035. I work with them, I talk with them, they help develop a prototype for this sign for me, which also says underneath it, if you get up close, you know, helping Cornell achieve its goal of carbon neutrality by 2035. So we're telling people what we're doing. And I probably could add to this, you know, we're creating pollinator habitat as well. I probably could modify the sign and go to the next level with it. So in addition, creating pollinator habitat, which I may do in the next rendition of signs.
Well, and since you brought it up, Dan, there's two other components that I want to talk about. One is obviously the mowing's evolved. And before we get to the pollinator stuff, let's talk for a second about the way you think nutrient management, fertilization, and weed control might have evolved in the way you've done it at the two institutions.
Well, at both institutions, and even here, we scout and we only treat the worst areas, high profile and worst areas. So, and that was in place before I got here. In fact, here they have more wonderful maps than I had at Rochester. I just had a campus map and I'd highlight and throw the square footage in for the company that came in to do the treatment for us, because we were just too taxed with other work to actually get out and get the weed control done at the right time. The challenges you have on a college campus are fitting your work around the students, right? You don't want to be out there and shutting down a portion of the campus for 24, 48 hours and the students can't use it, and let alone the phone calls you might get from concerned parents. So we just had that discussion today. We've got a crabgrass problem on the arts quad, and I was talking to Kevin about it, said, well, you know, you think we can get something in? It was pretty isolated. We can identify the areas and just get a straight pre-emergent control, no fertilizer, so we don't have to worry if an area we know didn't have it, we won't have striping or different colors. So we're talking about, he goes, well, you know, they're going to have Cornell Wellness Days out there for the students, and they're going to have movies starting on the arts quad in another couple weeks. They're going to have movies out there. So then the discussion obviously changed from, well, do we go from pre-emergent to post-emergent once the students leave? You know, so we're having, those are the kind of conversations you have here that you might not have in a commercial site. You know? Well,
but at the same time, Dan, you know, I can tell you there's not a person who works in this business all the time that doesn't appreciate the out of sight, out of mind phrase, right? I mean, I think people use pesticides even in places where they're highly restricted. They use them at Central Park under a very controlled way. They use them here in a very controlled way, in a targeted way. Not so much, maybe in the past, it was more of a blanketed approach where, you know, everything got a pre-emergent, everything got some fertilizer, everything got a broadleaf application, especially before graduation. And whether you're in the home lawn market or the golf course market, you want to sort of stay a little bit out of people's minds, especially in the lawn care industry where, you know, blowers have to get involved to make sure you're cleaning the pavement. and stuff like that. So I think it's one thing, you know, you've obviously been able to continue that practice of having strategic chemical use, but the growing interest in this pollinator enhancement in the aspect of the landscape is going to at some point likely going to bring up some discussion further beyond exposure to students in general. You know, how much are you using these other things? And I would say other as really any other pesticide, any pesticide, when you're now concerned about being part of the pollinator pathway. So how do you see that conversation evolving over the next several years as all of us start to see how big of a deal this conversation is going to be in the lawn and landscape area?
Well, I think the bee lawn, right, which is just coming to a campus near you. We've got a group of students that want to get involved in the bee lawn area. You know, I think it like anything, it'll have to be a mindset. Like anything with, you know, you and I have talked about the term maintenance and management, right? Maintenance is upkeep, just continual repair. You just go out and you do it. Management is you look at it and you establish, like you do with IPM for pests, you do the same thing with weeds. What's your threshold? What can you tolerate in a certain area? And I think our threshold for weeds will increase. That will, you know, we'll go from 2 dandelions per acre and you got to go out and treat down to, you know, 4 dandelions per square foot or something. I mean, I don't know, you know, I throw those out there, but at some point you're going to, the threshold and your tolerance will increase. I do see that happen. And that's already happening here at Cornell. We don't get, since I've been here and we've reduced, the lawns were, prior to my coming, had been let go a little bit, according to Kevin, and he had got them back in shape and, you know, with a pretty rigorous program. And we've been able to scale back from that now because of the work he did to get things under control and now target our approach. I don't know if we'll do away with it completely, but I do see more and more reductions coming. I think we might see that. I don't know if we're going to see that in the residential landscape. You and I have talked about it. People still want that green postage stamp in front of their house, but you know, you look at what's happening in Minnesota where they're giving out grants. They give out $900,000 worth of grants for people to turn their lawns into bee habitat. So
yeah, well, yeah, money, but yeah, I think you're right. I think when people start putting their money where their mouth is, I think there is going to be, like you said, an evolving aesthetic. But there's one thing that isn't evolving, Dan, as we're getting close to the wrap up here. I want to see if there's any questions, but I got to ask you, with snow on the ground outside, this is when I worry the most about sidewalk turf, that you're still going to put some salt out there today. And that grass has broke dormancy. It's a hell of a lot greener today than it was just a week ago. You know, we've had pretty consistently warm temperatures, or even if not warm, sunny. And sunny heats the pavement, breaks the dormancy of the plants next to it. You don't have graduation this year, I don't think, or maybe I don't know about in-person stuff, but we still got dead grass along the sidewalk. Did you make a decision today to try to mitigate that damage, or do you just now get into repair zone? And how do you manage that stuff right along the edge of the sidewalk now?
We're going to have to repair. We can't. The liability of not doing anything is, you know, is just, we just can't have that.
What about safer salts?
If you can afford them, you know, I got 61 miles of sidewalk and 15 miles of road. So, you know, if now what we have gotten is better metering on our equipment. And I had a chat with all of our staff before this snow, said temperatures are going to be warmer. We don't need as much product out. So close the gates down, slow things down a little bit. We don't need to put as much out, because there's incredible relationship between how salt works. I mean, between 30 and 25 degrees, salt loses 2/3 of its capability. At 30 degrees, a pound of salt melts 45 pounds of ice, and at 25 degrees, it only melts 15. So, I mean, the exponential
Big deal.
temperatures. But so the other morning, when it was snowing out, it was 34 degrees. You know, I mean, it was almost melting without salt. So the challenge we had was the refreeze last night when it got cold. So
See, this is, listen, we're getting close, Dan, but this is why we got to have you back. This salt conversation is a conversation in my mind of its own. I mean, we have probably operations in New York State where most of their revenue comes from managing salt in the lawn and landscape business if they're doing some plowing. But listen, Carl, what about questions? What about questions? How are we doing? We're getting close.
Yeah, so Ben Palmer has a good question. He's asking about, Dan, what are some of your communication strategies in dealing with, for example, students or employees who are concerned about pesticide use? I know we talked about the long grass, less gas signs. Have you had any strategies dealing with the community stakeholders in terms of pesticide use?
Yeah, I will tell you, since I've been here, I've probably only had 3 phone calls in the 5 growing seasons I've been here relating to that from a parent. And a lot of it was discussing kind of what we used, sharing with them, that products have things called LD50s and everything, just having a conversation a little bit about the science of it without trying to
justify it.
Yeah, to just say that, we use the safest products we can use, and here's why, and here's the reason why we're using it. Why do you use weed control? Well, some kids have bee allergies, and we want to be mindful of that. That's one of the issues with the tall grass. We got issues with rodents and ticks and other things that can come in those tall grass areas. So it's not as simple as just do it. But everything you do has some other sidebar, some other.
So I guess, Dan, I would say the answer to Ben's question is try to be as transparent as you can when they call you. But other than the signs, I think there is this out of sight, out of mind. You try to stay minimizing their exposure to it, using products that are targeted, not doing it when they're around or likely to encounter it. All of these things are critical aspects to, I think, talking about the mindset you have, that it isn't a blanketed approach, right? It isn't a blanket.
And I think your point, timing is important. So we missed the spring weed control window because of commencement and reunion and all that stuff. So we've gone to October as our next best. So we do our weed control application the fall when students are on fall break. So they leave campus, we do the application. Generally, the signs can be removed before they come back, or if they're still there, it doesn't matter. We're not trying to hide anything from them. They can still ask, but we try not to do it when there's a high student population, and that's a challenge working around.
Yeah. And that's a great question that can be a topic of many conversations when you get a bunch of professional land managers around. So Carl, Dan, let me thank you in advance. Thanks again. I'll look forward to our next beverage soon, I hope. And Carl, take us out of here.
Yes, thanks everyone. Episode 8 of the Cornell Turf Show in the books. Again, thanks to Dan Schied, Frank Rossi for stewarding us through this episode. We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, we're going to talk about some more infield skin stuff next week and some ways to quantify that. That'll be pretty cool for our Friday webinar next week.
Opening day. It's opening day, man. Baseball is underway, baby. I sat and watched 4 innings yesterday. The damn Yankees, you can't win scoring 2 runs, brothers. We didn't pay all that money to get 2 runs. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll check back in with everybody next week. Hopefully the Yanks have won a couple more for our Yankees fans out there. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Dan.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.